Cool. So, welcome to another real, raw, and related conversation. I'm here with August McLaughlin. I'm so excited for this conversation because we are going to get into a topic that I don't often talk about, is not often talked about, but so needs to be talked about. And that is how women's sexuality and our sexuality links to our relationship to food and to life. And this is something that August, she's experienced for herself. She had her own experience with anorexia. It helped her embrace and release her own sexuality. And she's now taken it upon herself to spread this message throughout the world. Considers herself an activist as well as an esteemed writer and speaker. So great to have you here, August.
Thank you for having me, Kendra. I'm so excited, and I love your mission.
Thank you. Well, and yours too. I love when connecting with women who we've had similar journeys in that eating disorder realm, and then we've taken that for something greater. It's a real kind of, I don't know, sisterhood around something that can be really awful.
It is. That was exactly what I was going to say. There is a sisterhood, definitely. There's this instant connection as soon as it's like you get each other in a way. Yeah.
Yeah. Like you don't have to explain. I know, I've been there. So, yeah. So August, I'm like waiting for this this bomb to drop with listeners, because if they haven't come across your work before, when I first went on your website, my jaw hit the ground, and I had to say that like prude in me was kind of like, So tell us the name of your brand and the message behind the mission.
My brand is called Girl Boner, and it's all about embracing your body and sexuality, and also arousing your whole life, because I really believe that these factors are inseparable. You know, you can't embrace and live your life fully if you're not living authentically. And I think that sexual shame and a lack of embracement around our sexuality is what keeps so many women from really, fulfilling their potential, from from embracing their whole bodies and their relationships. And it plays a huge role in our body image. Huge.
Yeah. Totally. Totally. And it's so funny because until I came across your work, I hadn't really been exploring that aspect for me. I kind of knew it was there. I knew about that link between sex and food and everything else. And the way I kind of thought about it was like your relationship to food reflects your relationship to life. And obviously your sexuality is a part of life. So there's that link, but I hadn't really explored it. So, and now I've brought attention to it. So this is going to be a fun one. So what I would love to know and start with is if you could tell us what was going on in your life when you found yourself, or maybe you didn't even realize, but food and how you were treating your body became your sort of way out and your release.
You know what's so interesting is I don't think it started out that way for me. I think eating disorders inevitably become about control and, not dealing with something else. I mean, that's always a factor, I think, on some level. But for me, from early on, as early as age 5, I just wanted to be like so many women. We want to live full lives. And I really was a big dreamer. I've always been, I still am. And when you're taught by society and culture and the media that to live a full, happy life, to have, the hot guy, the successful marriage, the career, this important, I didn't obviously understand it fully then when I was 5, that this was what was underneath it. But I think I was just trying to live a meaningful life. I wasn't hating myself. People have asked me that too, like, why did you hate yourself so much that you developed anorexia? I didn't hate myself. That I was trying to love myself, actually. I was trying to love life, and I was trying to succeed and move forward. So it became kind of a perfect/imperfect storm, because when I was around 5, 6 years old in kindergarten, that's the first time that I recall having really negative perceptions of my body. So I believed that I was chubby, and I wasn't. And that came from many different things. And one is that I have always loved food. It was probably my first passion. When my parents would tuck me out at night when I was really little, I'd ask them what we'd eat for breakfast so I could dream about it. And I'm not even kidding. I would say that so I can dream about it. And I also had a really high metabolism. I was really hyperactive and just a very outgoing kid running around all day. So I needed the fuel. But I also got teased for being so hungry, you know. People were doing it. It was very well intended. It was like, oh, August will eat it, you know, like I had like the hollow legs. I had a hollow body. I just wanted to eat all the time. I loved it. And I also, though, immediately, because kids are sponges, you know, we see how the world perceives food and bodies and beauty. And, you know, the women that I saw on TV, everybody that I looked up to, it seemed like either they were a certain kind of beauty and they were a certain kind of physique that was thin, or they were overweight and shunning themselves for it. They were wanting to go on a diet. My parents weren't dieting at all. They never said anything about that. But my mom did have a very poor body image. So I know that was a piece of it. But I think it was a collective. So I didn't say anything about it at first because it was sort of this little secret. When people have poor body image around you, especially if you're related to them, you know, I didn't want anyone else to feel, if I don't like my body, then what am I saying about yours, you know?
Yeah,
so
that judgment. Yeah.
What's that?
That judgment that goes back and forth. Yeah.
It does. It really does. And you're kind of trying to protect other people. And at the same time, you're judging yourself, which makes you judge other people. It's very complicated. And so I didn't do anything to change my weight for years. When I was going through adolescence around like 4th, 5th, 6th grade, I tried a few little diet type things because all those wonderful, strange things happen to your body. You know, we're learning about, I had one class on sexuality, and that is where Girl Boner was actually born, because we learned about male sexual pleasure a little bit. We learned about STDs, diseases we can get from sitting on toilet seats, abstinence, menstruation, cramps. I was stunned. And as soon as I learned what boner meant, I wondered, well, what's the good thing? What about girl boners? Like, that question was in my head when I was an adolescent. So
love it.
It's my whole life. So I carried around this curiosity, and nobody, especially I grew up in Minnesota, so especially in the Midwest, it's very, you don't really talk about stuff like that. It's in LA, it's a little more progressive. And it's changed a little bit, but still, this is what kids learn. We don't learn anything about that. So anyhow, my body's changing. You know, I notice squish where there wasn't any squish before. Just, you know, normal stuff. And I wasn't overweight, deemed myself incredibly chubby. And I thought my nightmares were coming true because I looked down and see that there were curves, you know, but I saw, oh my gosh, these nightmares of like, I'm going to get fat one day, fatter it's happening. And so I tried a few diets, and they just didn't, my own kind of thing, where I try to like not eat as much during the day. And then I end up eating like a whole bag of chips, or I would try to exercise and be bored after like 5 minutes. It wasn't working. So I just surrendered. I was like, this is not me. I will never be the person who can like diet or try not to eat. I just am going to eat, and I'm going to be chubby, and that's just the way it is. So fortunately, I did have some passions in my life. I got really into theater, musical theater in particular. And, you know, when you're in high school, you start having to make choices. So I liked basketball before that, but I didn't have time for it. I was the girl who wrote papers to get out of gym class. Like, I was not into any of that. I ended up just, you know, not being as active. And, you know, I probably gained a few pounds. But again, I was always within a normal weight range. There was never, it was all in my own perception that I was overweight. And when I was probably 15, 16, people started to make comments about my looks in a positive way, which stunned me. People told me that I could be a model, that I should be a model. They'd see a photo and they'd say, you're so photogenic. And I thought I would make up these excuses. I'm like, oh, I'm Swedish. I have Swedish cheekbones, and photogenic means they're more attractive in a picture than in person, or they're just being nice or whatever. But it kept happening. And then a modeling agent said it to me, and I ended up signing with an agency in Minneapolis. And I remember going into the modeling agency and thinking, they're gonna tell me to lose weight. Like, I was terrified. I thought, This is it. This is
No. Yeah.
And I was kind of, no pun intended, hungry for that. Like I wanted someone to say, you have to, because if someone else told me, then maybe I'd be successful at it. They didn't say
Interesting. Yeah.
They didn't say anything. And I ended up starting to work locally. I had, my photo was on the front of the Target ad. Like these things were happening that I thought, originally I thought if I could just have tangible proof, like one photo in a magazine, I would have this like evidence that I was attractive once. I wanted some sort of proof to say, and I wasn't really talking about being attractive again. It was much deeper. It's never about vanity. It was wanting to matter. And, but one picture was like very exciting. And then I got really into, because I like performing, I actually loved working with the cameras, and I could sort of step out of my insecurity. It was weird. I went from this I was really gawky, and like, I think I wore a big oversized flannel the first time I went into the modeling agency. I was just completely have no fashion whatsoever. And when the cameras started and someone else had done my makeup and they could see beauty, it was like this transformation. I felt like someone else's artwork and I could be not me anymore. And I loved it. It gave me this confidence just in front of the cameras. So I really enjoyed. And everything changed when a photographer came in from Los Angeles for a shoot. He'd chosen me and a couple other girls to shoot for an editorial shoot, which basically an editorial shoot would be like, the kind of Vogue type stuff where it's just much more artistic. It's like high fashion, the stuff that they do in New York and London and stuff like that, versus parkas that they do in Minnesota. So I did this photo.
Flannel fit right in.
Yeah, exactly. I was very high fashion in my flannel. But at the end of the day, this long day of shooting, and I had an amazing time, this photographer looked me in the eyes and he said, you realize you could be working in Paris, be modeling in Paris if you lost 10 or 15 pounds. And
did you have 10 or 15 pounds to lose?
No. At the time I was in a very healthy weight range for my body. Nobody at 16 is still developing, I could have probably healthfully lost 5 or 10 and been within my healthy range, but there was no need for it. I mean, only from the perspective of like the modeling agencies, it wasn't, there was no reason. So, but it was very interesting because I had this sort of dual moment where half of me was completely horrified. It's like everything you have been afraid of since you were a little tiny kid is true. And the other part of me was so excited. It was like, I have this reason and this motivation, and now I can really be somebody. So I tried to do it healthfully, and I thought I was. I started working with a personal trainer, and he put me on like one of his little plans, like 2 shakes and some gross tasting supplements. And I started to lose weight finally. When I lost, it took a little while, but I lost like, when they say 10 to 15 pounds and you're somebody who is a big dreamer, who's like, I want to really go for this, I want to give it my all, it has to be 15, So I get to 15 and it's like I'm getting so many compliments. And some of those compliments, as you know, from your experience, aren't really compliments, but you take them that way. So somebody would say, oh, you've lost weight, and they are horrified or they are concerned, and you're thinking, why, thank you. They think I'm gorgeous. They also noticed your progress and your effort. And I think there's this need for so many, especially young women and girls. We want some sort of validation. Like, tell me I'm okay. Tell me I'm important. Give me a grade. Give me an A. And so I very quickly realized that the thinner that I could become, the more successful I would feel. And I learned very quickly, the more money I would make. And within a couple of years, I was actually living in Paris, modeling in Paris, after moving to New York first. And I modeled for one of the most prestigious agencies in the world, Wilhelmina. And in Paris, I collapsed while I was running near the river one morning, which I'd collapsed before, but this time was quite different. I'd been having strange heart palpitations and stuff like that. And I don't know how I made it to the medical center, but I woke up there. It's very, very spotty in my head. But I was told that I nearly died and I still could die. And they told me I had anorexia. which was, I mean, I just couldn't wrap my head around it. I was like, these people are crazy.
Yeah.
But that was sort of the first turning points, if you will.
Yeah. So you've said so much in there that's like, oh my goodness, I can relate to. I'm sure the women watching this can relate to. There's one thing I want to dig into. So you said something there that you could just not be you anymore, right? So it's like in front of the camera and in front of the photographer, it gave you the permission to be somebody else. And I'm wondering, I'd love to know, why didn't you want to be you?
It's a really good question. At that time, I think what I really wanted to escape was insecurity. It's a very, very dark, just icky feeling to walk around feeling like you're ugly and you're just not acceptable or attractive physically, emotionally, and any, it started to really get to me, these beliefs I had about my body, and I didn't want to feel insecure. So I wanted to be someone confident, and I wasn't. Most teenage girls, are lacking in that department to some level. And I think that it's particularly difficult when you already have poor body image going in. So I just wanted to share that and be somebody who really loved herself, like really, really felt awesome about herself. Like, she knows how to dress, she knows how to stand, she knows how to seduce the camera, she can be strong and powerful. And I think that was really at the heart of it, was to feel powerful, to feel, really truly beautiful from the inside out. This sort of, these women that I would see with this sort of like aura about them, I didn't know that if you really want that, it's about embracing yourself, not escaping it. Yeah. But that's the new at the time.
Totally. And so you said before as well that there was, the what you call it, the model recruiter or agent or whatever, I don't know the technical industry term, but the guy told you lose 10 or 15 pounds and then you could make it on the runway in Paris. And I'm wondering, when you lost the 10 or 15 pounds, did that solve that problem of, I don't want to be me? And so did that give you the confidence and the self-love and the self-acceptance in the same way that you might have thought it would have?
That's an excellent question. I compare it to a bad relationship, like a bad romantic relationship. When you meet, like, say I meet a guy or a girl, you meet somebody who is really, really Mr. Mrs. Wrong, who you could be a very toxic relationship. But when you're falling in love with that person, it's intoxicating. So at first, it was very intoxicating. I felt like I will never forget those moments. It's like the first time I stood on the scale and saw the number actually go down. I mean, that should not matter that much, but to that little girl, me, really, the teenage girl, I had accomplished the impossible. Like, that was amazing to me. So I think initially, yes, it gave me some confidence, but it's very short-lived because, as you know, your perception isn't accurate. And so when I got to those 10 to 15 pounds, very quickly, it doesn't feel like it. And it's sort of like a fix. It's like a drug fix almost, because you keep needing more. Like, I never stopped wanting to lose weight, even when I was anorexic. I didn't know I was anorexic, but you never, and the thinner or the sicker, because you don't actually, as you know, have to get thinner to have a very severe eating disorder. And arguably, I was at least as sick when I was at a healthier weight during my recovery. But it's like, it's a very, it messes with your brain so much. And then you're malnourished as well. Yeah. So when your brain is not working right, you see something that nobody else sees. I mean, nobody else remembers me being overweight. I will always remember me. I can't forget her. That's me. I mean, that was me. It still is a part of me, and it's a part that I still cherish and I don't want to forget, because I value so much the lessons and the rewards that have come And I want to be able to empathize and, as you're doing, speak up and make a difference, because the other side is magical. I mean, it's incredible. Yeah. We're so scared of recovery, but it is awesome.
Thank you so much for going there and sharing that. And I'm glad we did, because so I remember about 6 months ago, I was leading a group workshop, and there were women, a variety of sizes in the room, and some of the larger women had I call it a judgment, but I don't mean it in a like judgmental way, but this expectation that if you were smaller, that you never felt the same way about yourself, and you never felt the same way about your body. And I remember thinking, like, I was basically like, trust me, it's not the case, right? Like, trust me. But it was funny, because I recently read a blog post called The Aftermath, and it was a woman who was basically just blogging about her weight loss story. And she lost probably close to over 100 pounds, maybe close to 200 pounds, I'm not quite sure. But she's down to a weight of, that's like healthy for her body size. And she's like, do you know what? Like, I thought when I got to this size, I would then feel good about myself. And now that I'm this size, I still don't feel good about myself, and I'm still kind of the same person. And I'm glad we went there with your story too, because I feel like for someone listening, regardless of your size, that's just like the outward stuff. It's irrelevant to the journey that you go on, that the true recovery isn't about your body. It's not about your weight. The true recovery is how you're feeling about yourself. And I know that's been your journey too, right? Like that's how you can say I'm recovered. It's not like I step on a scale and it's a different number.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so interesting too. And I understand why women who are overweight would not necessarily want to, hear just embrace your body from somebody who on the surface, they're thinking you are what I'm trying to, or you have some of what I'm trying to get.
Yeah.
I understand mentality fully, because we've had it too. Like, it is this, I've always long said that obesity and anorexia are two sides of the exact same coin. They are more similar usually. And I'm talking about, not all obesity obviously is the same, just as all eating disorders are not the same. But when it comes from like emotional eating and whatnot, they're more similar than almost even the health risks, osteoporosis, heart problem, everything, depression. And actually, when I was going through treatment, I spent a lot of time online, because you're hiding from the world, and it was like a good escape for me. And I used to hang out in this chat room. It was through Oprah's website, and it was obese women talking about food issues, and we were speaking the same language. It was the only place that I felt like we get each other.
Wow.
It is very, very similar. And it's interesting too, because, I don't share the specific numbers, of my, sometimes people want to know like lowest weight, whatever, because that's not important, can be triggering, as you know. But like, I got down to a point that was very unhealthy. And during recovery, when I was relapsing and I went through binge eating, I almost doubled my lowest weight. And I went through, when you're gaining weight, I was on a 4,000 calorie per day diet this dietitian put me on, which was very, very devastating in so many ways for somebody who had been barely eating and not taking care of herself. And I had edema, so my body was swelling. I was starving, so I could see, there was like almost bags of water. It was not just my perception. People could see the swelling, because my body's just like holding on to everything it can. And when I was going through the recovery process, one of the biggest, most powerful things to me, in addition to embracing my sexuality, was giving myself, I had been dieting and lifestyle planning, or whatever you want to call it. So many lifestyle plans. They're diets now, right? So I would do all these plans, but it was just driving me crazy, because they're all written as though it's science, and it's not. And it's so deceptive, and such a big, scary industry. And I was getting such headaches from all the contradictions. And every time I would try to fight I couldn't get my anorexia back. It was like this soulmate that I lost. And so I was brokenhearted over it. grieving it, and at this, because I wanted the beginning, I wanted the intoxicating part where I could be thin and intoxicated, but you never can have that. It's not a sustainable thing. It's, it's not. It's just part of the entry into this. It's just like the gateway drug, and so I had to, every time I would try to slim down, I would end up binging, and to the point where I went into bulimic trances, they call them.
Okay.
Even though I wasn't diagnosed with bulimia, it was really more binge eating, but I was told it's called a bulimic trance, where you eat so much in one sitting that you don't even know all you've eaten until after. And it was horrifying. I actually ended up going to court. This is something I've never shared, because I apparently ran a stop sign, a bus stop sign. There were kids. I didn't hurt anybody bad. And I don't remember it. I don't even know if I did it. My mom had to a policeman came to my door. I was in college at the time in little small town Minnesota. I couldn't drive. They said, your license has been revoked. And I was like, what? I was so removed. And
because you were in a trance eating, like you were eating while you were driving. And
I was actually, based on the time they said it happened, I was driving in a frantic craze to the grocery store, because I would also go to the grocery store and not even know everything. It was so weird. It was like that sort of, when you have a dream that's really real and you can't quite really happen. It was like that. So, that's really dangerous. But what devastated me at the time, it certainly was a wake-up call to think, oh my gosh, I could have hurt somebody else, because that's a very different thing.
Yeah.
But I would wake up just sobbing and looking around and have these faint recollections of, oh my gosh, I did buy a box of Little Debbie's and ate all of them. I ate, people throw binge around like it's like, oh, I ate too many chips. No, I ate thousands of calories in a sitting. And so that, and then trying to diet in between, because you can't surrender. I felt incapable of surrendering to this, just eat like a quote normal person, because you don't believe you are. You believe there's something wrong with you. You can't ever be a normal person. So, but I got so devastated and just fed up and sick of being tired of everything. I didn't have any purpose in my life, and having grown up and been a total dreamer since I could think.
Yeah.
What am I doing? I'm like, what am I doing for the world? I'm not helping anybody. This is just a mess. I don't care if I gain weight anymore. I did, but I had to not. So I surrendered, and I said, I'm going to give myself 1 year with I have goosebumps in my cheeks right now, with no dieting, no attempts to lose weight at all. I don't care if I binge every day. I'm going to eat the next. I would not. So after that, so that was right after a binge, the next morning with my distended stomach and feeling like I'm going to throw up because I ate more than a whole football team probably should have for breakfast. And I ate, and I sat there sobbing and trying to put the food in my mouth and trying to tell myself these affirmations that felt ridiculous, because I didn't believe any of them. I'm like, you're awesome. Yeah. And so I got through the meal, and there was this crazy empowerment after. I just felt like, oh my gosh, it was this biggest fear was eating another meal. What is that?
Yeah.
So I just kept going, and I cut all the size tags off my clothes. I got rid of my scales. I got rid of every diet book. I got rid of every magazine that had anything that I would compare myself to. But a big part of that, and we can talk about this more, but big part of the reason that I was starting to believe that there really is more, there really is something out there that's more for me, was because of this sexuality class and the teacher who became a bit of a mentor. But that year, it's amazing, because I thought, if I give myself a year and I get to the end of it, who cares? I can diet again.
Yeah.
But what I was doing was not working, and it wasn't happy. I wasn't acceptable anymore. And I thought, I'm going to be single. I'm going to wear big clothes. I'm going to not care. I'm going to just recreate this person and be on an island for a year where I do eat meals. And it was incredible. That was a big step. That was really, I think, the turning point that helped me start to recover. And then the next step was learning I wanted to appreciate food again and enjoy it.
Yeah.
Was told by even a treatment professional that I would always struggle. And I was really pissed off about that. So I studied.
I know, it's not what you need to hear. Oh, you might not get 100% better. Come on, what hope is that? why would I go down that path just to like smell it but not be able to taste it? But what you just shared, like, this is so crazy because so much of my journey is, it like reflects it. But that point of surrender, of being like, do you know what? I don't care anymore what happens. I don't care if I'm the size of a house. I don't care if my clothes don't fit. Like, I just don't want to be living like this anymore. And that decision, that surrender that you talked about, it's, to me, it's crucial. Like, because like you say, everything before that, it doesn't work. I'm totally with you on that. And it's so funny because that to me is like the starting point of the journey. And what you talked about of having that purpose, to me, is like the end. It's like to have that sight of like, why am I doing this in the first place? It's because I have something to give to the world. I have dreams that I want to see come to fruition. I have a purpose, something to give outside of me. And it's like, you know, because it's otherwise it's like, well, why do I want this to go away? Just so I can feel better about myself? Like, kind of a good goal, but maybe not good enough.
Yeah, no, it's so true, because that's not what guides any of us into those illnesses. It's not like you're trying. No, none of those people are trying to have a mediocre life. They're trying to not. So it's it's interesting because I ended up. I was studying psychology at the time, and there wasn't a nutrition program, but I started doing distance courses, and I would go to the bookstores and read physiology books and medical texts because I couldn't find books that weren't all skewed and contradictory in the diet section. And so I did. I ended up working as outreach. It was initially for myself to heal these attitudes, but for about 8.5 years, I worked as a nutritional therapist, not just for people with eating disorders, but disordered eating associated with like depression, anxiety, all kinds of stuff. And the reason I brought that up is because you're so right about what you're saying with, you know, the way that those surrender moments, and also the big dreams. Because what I saw, and I worked with hundreds, thousands, if you include like classes and stuff like that, of people while I was carrying on with my life. I was always doing, and I still do a bit, but I noticed that the worst cases and the saddest were when women, or in some cases men, they didn't have any hope for anything. You'd ask them, what is your biggest dream? Because usually treatment programs don't talk about anything but food, which is kind of messed up. And they'd say, I don't know. Like, well, what is your biggest goal in life? I just want to lose weight. Well, what do you, if you were the perfect weight for yourself in your mind, what would you do? I have no, they have no idea.
They think about it. Yeah.
So once you surrender, which isn't an easy thing to you can't just make it snap happen, but it really does. It opens the gateway for extraordinary things.
Yeah, totally. So let's get into the sexuality piece, because I want to hear, and it's what you were saying before, it's like, I just want to be me. And part of me, and I'm kind of coming into this in my later years of my recovery and my journey, but it's like part of me is owning my own sexuality, owning my femininity, owning that part of me that has been buried for so long. So tell me, how did you make the link for yourself that was so crucial for you?
It was purely an accident. I had day treatment in Minnesota. So I'd go in for a day to this hospital, and as that went down to like an hour at a time or whatever, I had nothing else going on. I'd been traveling all over the place, living out of my suitcase and, working in fashion. And suddenly I was in like this small town and just had nothing to do except think about recovery and go to treatment, which is like, So I decided to take a college course, and it was the summer, and I ended up taking, because I've always been interested in psychology, it was psychology of female sexuality.
Okay.
And I thought, well, that sounds interesting. Why not? And they had the opening. So it was such an incredible experience. The instructor was so powerful and just very empowering, and became a very important person in my life. But the class was the first time that I talked about my sexuality ever. I mean, really, or sex. I'd had sex. I'd had one serious boyfriend, basically from high school, and then kind of on and off, and was with him at the time. So I had sex, but I had never once, like this is so naive, but in high school I thought I was the only person having sex.
Right.
And of course, oh, that's so bad. Like it's not, the feeling bad about it didn't make me not want to do it. It also didn't make me want to do it. I just had a boyfriend and this is the thing that felt good. And it was very interesting because he actually the first time said, you realize this means we have to get married. And I'm like, oh, yeah, whatever. Like I wasn't, for me, it was just, we didn't really talk about it though. And I didn't talk about it to my girlfriends. And, then I was traveling around, and when you're dealing with an eating disorder, you're pretty isolated. So it's not like I had like super close girlfriends that I was chatting about sex. None of my friends actually did talk about it. And so it was really amazing to sit with other peers and just talk about it, and it was the first time that I realized that I even had shame around sexuality in my body, and that goes, I think it's a very complex thing, but most girls and women especially have shame around their sexuality. We're taught that it's a sin. We're taught that good girls don't have sex, or they only have sex with a limited number of partners, or just one guy, or once you're married, or there's all these rules around it. And we're deemed either prudes or sluts, and which is like one of the worst words ever to come about, only important because it brings up these conversations. But I could not stop talking about it. I still haven't, obviously, but my boyfriend at the time, oh my gosh, he was terrified of me. Like I came home and I was just like, oh my God, you won't believe, and I'm studying like female history and what women haven't learned. And oh my gosh, the teacher was standing in the front and said, do you know that a lot of women don't even know where their clitoris is? And I was like, that's crazy. And inside I'm going, I have no idea where my clitoris is. So I was looking at a mirror and I'm reading stuff and I was like, I can't believe I never thought of, like, what was I thinking that it didn't matter? But it totally makes sense because we're taught nothing. I mean, we're taught, and it's not our parents' fault. Our parents didn't get taught anything either.
No, they didn't get to talk about it either. Yeah,
it's amazing. And I just don't think that you can embrace your body if you've cut off this incredible, beautiful, powerful, natural part of yourself. And that's kind of you. And if you never investigate those attitudes or nurture it the way you would nurture any part of your health, I just don't think that you can live fully. So it was really empowering for me. And I didn't know I'd do, so much with it until later. But that realization, that sort of epiphany that, wow, this matters, that this shame that I did carry around and never really thought too much about had eaten away at me. If I had been taught to masturbate or encouraged when I was an adolescent, I don't think that I would have either. It's possible it would have prevented me from struggling with depression, which I think is a big factor in my eating disorder. I really think that all those hormones that we're having and, pleasure needs to be a part of that education process. So sadly, since we don't have it, most women as adults need to educate themselves. And it starts just in your own, wherever you are, on your journey, just saying, I'm going to prioritize this. It's really huge.
And so I want to hear a little bit more, like, how did those realizations, those conversations, starting just to acknowledge your own feelings, speak your truth for the first time, how did then that translate and help on your recovery from anorexia?
It's very interesting because it wasn't this super obvious thing where, it's not like I had this like sexual trauma that I'd never dealt with. And that was causing body shame. It wasn't like that. But what it did was it just led me to think about all these things. And there's shift of focus as well, because suddenly I became passionate also about learning more about myself and respecting a part of my body that I never had before, which was really exciting. And as soon as I embrace that part of myself, which really only takes a decision, it's like, it doesn't mean that you're, it's a journey your whole life, but just that decision to say, I'm going to embrace my sexuality is so powerful. And it just became easier for me to take care of myself in every way, and I also, I considered myself, except for when I was anorexic, because that really does kill it takes away all your femininity. It takes away your sex thing. So I definitely, I sort of had this resurgence of almost not another puberty, but just, you know, being able to feel again. And so my, you know, and when prior to having anorexia, I thought I had a really high sex drive because I wanted to have sex and I was a girl.
Yeah.
You know, actually, it's very normal for women to enjoy sex and want to have it. I didn't know that then. So, you know, because I just kept hearing about people saying about, you know, women talking about faking orgasms and trying to get out of sex. And I was like, what? Then what's wrong with me? You know, like, it's super fun.
Want to. Yeah.
So I think also prioritizing sex within my life, which was part of that, was like nurturing that part of myself from a mental, spiritual standpoint and a physical standpoint was really a way to respect my body more, to care for it more. And I had to forgive myself for all that shame because I didn't realize, you know, when I was about 5 years old, 4 or 5 years old, I remember my grandfather was a pastor and my grandmother was a nurse. They were missionaries, and a really strict denomination where you're not even allowed to hold hands, you know, until you go on dates with chaperones. Like my mom wasn't allowed to dance when she was little. So I remember having a bath and asking, because kids are curious and you have questions about genitalia, and it's totally normal. We're sexual beings from birth. And so I asked her, like, what's in there? And she's like, you know, I don't remember the exact wording, but she essentially told me, you'll never touch that. You'll go to hell. Like never touch it. So that was scary to me. Like, I don't want to go to hell. And so you don't realize how much those things get to you. And so letting go of all that shame, and it can be, I make it sound like it was just all pure joy. There's actually a lot of being pissed off too, because I realized that there were injustices that I wasn't fully aware of in the world, and that had affected not only me, but so many other girls and women especially. And as I research it more and want to speak up, I'd also face a lot of resistance, which I still do, you know, but it's different now. It's Gloria Steineman has this great quote that I love. The truth will set you free, but first it'll piss you off. That might be a little off, but basically, like,
that is great. Yeah.
Isn't it awesome? It's like, it's the same thing with eating disorders. It's like you have to get pissed off at your situation, but then it'll let you go. Like you can give everything. You can say, you know what? So now, you know, because people, when I started my Girl Boner series, which started as a blog series, I trademarked it. I applied for the trademark because I thought everyone's going to want to trademark this because I was so excited about it. And not realizing how much like people are totally terrified of sexuality. And so then I started my blog series, and that took my blog from, I had a loyal following, but I went from my first year, I had like 16,000 people visited my blog. The last 2 years, I've had over 500,000. Like I think I'm around 700.
Yeah.
And so I knew that I was hitting a something that needed to be said, and conversations that just, the conversation just needed to be started. But when I started it, all these people were telling me, you're so brave, you're so brave. And I was like, what are you talking about? I'm just talking about what I want to talk about.
Yeah.
Now I get it. It's like people get really shunned for talking about these things. But now, instead of getting really pissed off about something that's happening, I feel like I can make somewhat of a difference, you know, which my blog led to my radio show, and which you're going to appear on in the future, I hope. So it's, you know, it's wonderful to be able to have those conversations, and we've come a long way as a society in some ways, but there's so much more work to be done. So I think the key really though is just prioritizing, just saying, I want to embrace my sexuality, whatever the heck that means. I don't need to know all that means yet, but embrace it, decide to step into it, to own it, and it, you know, take an inventory, because so many women are, which we shouldn't be shunned for either, having shame around it, but it's like we're sort of, we think it's all dirty and naughty and taboo because that's what we're taught, but it's really not. It's not something you need to, like, you know, you don't need to have sex in front of everybody unless that empowers you, but you just need to have a healthy, respectful relationship with it for yourself, whatever.
I love what you just said there. I feel like this is a perfect place to wrap up because I was going to ask you if you had to leave, what's one place to start for someone to explore their sexuality? It's like just to embrace it. And I love that we brought shame into the conversation because for me, I think it's a huge part of an eating disorder is that there's some sort of shame about ourselves. And whether it is your sexuality and that's a conscious awareness or a subconscious awareness that's buried in there, it's probably there somewhere because your sexuality is a part of you. And so if you're feeling shame about you, most likely you're feeling shame about your sexuality. And it's not what you did, right? It's like Brene Brown saying, like, shame isn't like, I'm sorry for what I did. It's, I'm sorry for who I am. So it's not like the sexual acts that you've done, but it's like who you are as a sexual being. So yeah, I love that you've just offered that olive branch to just like embrace it. Like it's part of you. Go for it. Yeah. Is there anything else you want to leave the listeners with?
Oh gosh. Well, I think authenticity is everything. So whoever you are and whatever your passion is, I really believe that following your passion and embracing yourself, those are like the keys to bettering the world, to living a full life. And if you're struggling with food issues, body image issues, if you can find just one thing that you really want to put your heart into, it makes all the difference, and it makes self-embracement easier. So it's baby steps, not beating ourselves up for anything along the way. It takes everyone different amounts of time. It's totally fine if you're struggling right now. The fact that anyone's watching this is saying, I want to improve. I want to grow and learn. And that's where it all starts. There's hope, there's healing, there's hope, and there's so much joy to be had.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that. August, this has been an absolutely amazing conversation. I feel like I could go on for hours, but we don't have hours. So we'll wrap it up. Thank you so much for being here. Where can people find you?
The easiest place is my website. It's just www.augustmclaughlin.com, MC-LAUGH, L-I-N. My show, you can find, it streams on my website, but you can also find it on iTunes, on web radio. It's all over the place. And it's every week, and I interview it's not just about sex-specific topics, but sexual embracement, empowerment are the kind of the main themes. And we have a lot of fun. So I'd love it if people check it out.
Yeah, definitely. And guys, go. And I feel like I want to put my 2 cents in there is that when I first came across August, I was like, girl boner, is that for me? Like, it's so, it's like, I don't know, I'm not that risque, but you do it in such a safe way. And I think that's the thing. And especially when you're exploring this, it can feel, it's very vulnerable. And so you want a safe place to be able to listen to things and to share and to talk. And August creates that space for you. So I would definitely check her out. Thank you again so much. This has been amazing. And we'll be talking soon.
Sounds good. Thank you.